in virtual reality. I'm going to start on page 856, October 22nd, 1885. It was Thursday evening. A few days after the Durga, Sri Ramakrishna sat on his bed in his room, Ishan and other devotees. Although Dr. Sakar was a very busy physician, he would spend a long time, sometimes 6 or 7 hours, in Ramakrishna's company. He had great love for the master and looked on the devotees as his own kith and kin. A lamp was burning in the room. Moonlight illumined the outside world. Addressing Ishan, a householder devotee, the master said, "Blessed indeed is the householder who performs his duties in the world, at the same time cherishing love for the lotus feet of God. He is indeed a hero. He is like a man who carries a heavy load of 2 mounds on his head and at the same time watches a bridal procession. One cannot lead such a life without great spiritual power. Again, such a man is like the mudfish, which lives in the mud but is not stained by it. Further, such a householder may be compared to a waterfowl. It is constantly diving underwater, yet by fluttering its wings only once, it shakes off all trace of wet. But a man must practice some spiritual discipline in order to be able to lead a detached life in the world. It is necessary for him to spend some time in solitude, be it a year, 6 months, 3 months, or even 1 month. In that solitude, he should fix his mind on God and pray with a longing heart for love of God. He should also say to himself, "There is nobody in this world who is my own. Those whom I call my own are here only for 2 days. God alone is my own. He alone is my all in all. Alas, how shall I realize him?" One cannot live in the world after acquiring love for God. One can live in the One can live in the world after acquiring love of God. It is like breaking the jackfruit after rubbing your hands with oil. The sticky juice of the fruit will not smear them. The world is like water, and the mind like milk. If you put milk in water, it will mix with the water. But first keep the milk in a quiet place and let it turn into curd. Then from the curd extract butter. That butter you may keep in water. It will not mix with the water, but will float on it. Some members of the Brahmo Samaj said to me, "Sir, our attitude toward the world is that of King Janaka. Like him, we want to enjoy the world in a detached spirit." I said to them, "To live in the world in a detached spirit is very difficult. By merely saying so, you cannot be as King Janaka. How much austerity Janaka practiced. How long he remained in one posture with head down and feet up. How long you don't have to practice these extreme disciplines, but you need sadhana. You should live in solitude. You may lead the life of a householder after having attained divine knowledge and love in solitude. Milk turns into curd only when it is not disturbed. The curd does not set if the milk is often moved from place to place or is too much disturbed. On account of his detachment from the world, Janaka was also known as Videha, that is, one free from consciousness of the body. Though living in the world, he moved about as a Jivan Mukta, a free soul living in a body. But for most people, freedom from body consciousness is something very far off. Intense spiritual discipline is necessary. Janaka was a great hero. He fenced with 2 swords, the one of knowledge and the other of work. You may ask, Is there any difference between the realizations of two jnanis, one a householder and the other a monk? The reply is that the two belong to one class. Both of them are jnanis. They have the same experience, but a householder jnani has reason to fear. He cannot altogether get rid of his fear as long as he is to live in the midst of lust and greed. If you constantly live in a room full of soot, you are sure to soil your body, be it ever so little, no matter how clever you may be. After extracting the butter, if you keep it in a new pot, then there's no chance of it getting spoiled. But if you keep the butter in a pot where curd has been kept, well, then it is doubtful whether it will keep its flavor. All laughed. When they parch rice, a few grains jump out of the frying pan to the ground. These are white, like mullica flowers, without the slightest stain on them. But the grains that remain in the pan are also good, though not as immaculate as the fresh mullica flower. They are a little stained. In the same way, if a monk who has renounced the world attains divine wisdom, he appears as spotless as the white flower. But one who stays in the frying pan of the world after attaining knowledge may get a little blemish. All laugh. Once a Bhairavi came to King Janaka's court. At the sight of the woman, the king bent his head and cast his eyes on the ground. At this, the Bhairavi said, "O Janaka, even now you are afraid of a woman. Through perfect knowledge, a man becomes like a child 5 years old. He does not know the distinction between a man and a woman. Although a jnani living in the world may have a little blemish, yet this does not injure him. The moon undoubtedly has dark spots, but these do not obstruct the light. After realizing God, some souls perform work in order to teach men. Janaka, Narada, and others like them belong to this group. But one must possess power in order to be able to teach others. The sages of old were busy attaining knowledge for themselves. But teachers like Narada went about doing good to others. They were real heroes. A worthless stick floating on the water sinks under the weight of a bird, but a heavy and substantial log floating on the water can support a cow, a man, or even an elephant. A steamboat not only crosses the water itself, but carries many human beings with it. Teachers like Narada may be compared to the heavy log of wood or the steamboat. One man, after eating a tasty morsel, removes every trace of it by wiping his face carefully with a towel, lest anyone should know. All laugh. Another, again, having got a mango, not only enjoys it himself, but shares it with others. Even after having attained perfect knowledge, teachers like Narada retained love of God in their minds for the welfare of others. Doctor, jnana makes a man speechless. He closes his eyes and sheds tears. Then he needs bhakti. Master, bhakti may be likened to a woman who has access to the inner court of a house. Jnana can only go so far as the outer rooms. Doctor, all women are not allowed to enter the inner court. For instance, prostitutes, hence the need for jnana. Master, a man may not know the right path, but if he has bhakti and the desire to know God, then he attains him through the force of sheer bhakti. Once a sincere devotee set out on a pilgrimage to the temple of Jagannath in Puri. He did not know the way. He went west instead of south. He no doubt strayed from the right path, but he always eagerly asked people the way, and they gave him the right direction, saying, "This is not the path. Follow that one." At last the devotee was able to get to Puri and worship the deity. So you see, Even if you are ignorant, someone will tell you the way if you are earnest. Doctor, but the devotee in his ignorance did lose his way. Master, yes, such a thing happens, no doubt, but a man reaches the goal in the end. A devotee, has God a form, or is he formless? Master, God has form, and again, he is formless. Once upon a time, a sannyasi entered the temple of Jagannath. As he looked at the holy image, he debated with himself whether God had a form or was formless. He passed his staff from left to right to feel whether it touched the image. The staff touched nothing. He understood that there was no image before him. He concluded that God was formless. Next, he passed the staff from right to left. It touched the image. The sannyasi understood that God had form. Thus he realized that God has form, and again is formless. But it is extremely difficult to understand this. Naturally, the doubt arises in the mind. If God is formless, how then can he have form? Further, if he has form, why does he have so many forms? Doctor, God has created all these forms in the world. Therefore, he himself has a form. Again, he has created the mind. Therefore, he is formless. It is possible for God to be everything. Master, these things do not become clear until one has realized God. He assumes different forms and reveals himself in different ways for the sake of his devotees. A man kept a solution of dye in a tub. Many people came to him to have their cloths dyed. He would ask a customer, "What color would you like to have your cloth dyed?" If the customer wanted red, then the man would dip the cloth in the tub and say, "Here's your cloth dyed red." If another customer wanted the cloth dyed yellow, the man would dip his cloth in the same tub and say, "Here's your cloth dyed yellow." If a customer wanted his cloth dyed blue, the man would dip it in the same tub and say, "Here's your cloth dyed blue." Thus he would dye the clothes of his customers different colors, dipping them all in the same solution. One of the customers watched all this with amazement. The man asked him, "Well, what color do you want your cloth?" The customer said, "Brother, dye my cloth the color of the dye in your tub." All laughed. Once a man went into the wood and saw a beautiful creature on a tree. Later he told a friend about it and said, "Brother, on a certain tree in the wood I saw a red-colored creature." The friend said, "I have seen it too, but why do you call it red? It's green." The friend answered, A third man said, "Oh, no. Why do you call it green? It is yellow." Then other persons began to describe the animal variously as violet, blue, or black. Soon they were quarreling about the color. At last they went to the tree and found a man sitting under it. In answer to their questions, he said, "I live under this tree and know that creature very well. What each one of you has said about it is true. Sometimes it is red, sometimes green, sometimes yellow, sometimes blue, and so forth and so on. Again, sometimes I see that it has no color whatsoever." Only he who constantly thinks of God can know his real nature. He alone knows that God reveals himself in different forms and different ways, that he has attributes and again has none. Only the man who lives under the tree knows that the chameleon can assume various colors and that sometimes it remains colorless. Others, not knowing the whole truth, quarrel among themselves and suffer. Yes, God has form, and again, he has none. Do you know how it is? Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, is like a shoreless ocean. In the ocean, visible blocks of ice are formed here and there by intense cold. Similarly, under the cooling influence, so to speak, of the bhakti of the worshippers, the infinite transforms itself into the finite and appears before the worshipper as God with form. That is to say, God reveals himself to his bhaktas as an embodied person. Again, as on the rising of the sun, the ice in the ocean melts away, so on the awakening of jnana, the embodied God melts back into the infinite and formless Brahman. Doctor: Yes, when the sun is up, the ice melts, and what is more, the heat of the sun turns the water into invisible vapor. Master: Yes, that is true. As a result of the discrimination that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory, the aspirant goes into samadhi. Then, for him, the forms or attributes of God disappear altogether. Then he does not feel God to be a person. Then he cannot describe in words what God is. And who will describe it? He who is to describe does not exist at all. He no longer finds his I. To such a person, Brahman is attributeless. In that state, God is experienced only as consciousness, by man's inmost consciousness. He cannot be comprehended by the mind and intelligence. Therefore, people compare bhakti, love of God, to the cooling light of the moon, and jnana, knowledge, to the burning rays of the sun. I have heard that there are oceans in the extreme north and extreme south, where the air is so cold that it freezes the water into huge blocks of ice here and there. Ships cannot move there. They are stopped by the ice. Doctor: Then in the path of bhakti, the aspirant meets with obstacles. Master: Yes, that is true, but it does not cause the devotee any harm. After all, it is the ocean of Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, that is frozen into ice. It will not injure you if you continue to reason, saying, for instance, that Brahman alone is real and the world is illusory. This reasoning will awaken in you jnana, which, like the sun, will melt the ice of divine forms back into the infinite ocean of Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. In the samadhi that comes at the end of reasoning and discrimination, no such thing as I exists. But it is extremely difficult to attain it. I consciousness lingers so persistently. That is why a man is born again and again in this world. The cow suffers so much because she says hamba, hamba, that is I. She is yoked to the plow all day long, rain or shine, or she is slaughtered by the butcher. But even that doesn't put an end to her misery. The cobbler tans her hide to make shoes from it. At last the carter makes a string for his bow from her entrails and uses the string in carding. Then it says, to who? That is, thou. Only then does the cow's suffering come to an end. Likewise, only when a man says, not I, I am nobody, O Lord. Thou art the doer, and I am thy servant. Thou art the master. Is he freed from all sufferings. Only then is he liberated. Doctor: But one must fall into the hands of the carter. All laugh. Master: If this ego cannot be got rid of, then let the rascal remain as a servant of God. All laugh. A man may keep his ego even after attaining samadhi. Such a man feels either that he is a servant of God or that he is a lover of God. Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge to teach men's spiritual life. The servant ego, the knowledge ego, and the devotee ego may be called the ripe ego. It is different from the unripe ego, which makes one feel, I am the doer, I am the son of a wealthy man, I am learned, I am rich. How dare anyone slight me? A man with an unripe ego cherishes such ideas. Suppose a thief has entered such a man's house and stolen some of his belongings. If the thief is caught, all the articles will be snatched away from him. Then he will be beaten. At last it will be handed over to the police. The owner of the stolen goods will say, "What? This rogue doesn't know whose house he has entered." After realizing God, a man becomes like a child 5 years old. The ego of such a man may be called the ego of a child, the ripe ego. The child is not yet under the control of the gunas. He is beyond the three gunas. He is not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, rajas, or tamas. Just watch a child, and you will find that he is not under the influence of tamas. One moment he quarrels with his chum, or even fights with him, and the next moment he hugs him, shows him much affection, and plays with him again. He is not even under the control of rajas. Now he builds his playhouse and makes all kinds of plans to make it beautiful. And the next moment, he leaves everything behind and runs to his mother. Again, you see, he is wearing a beautiful piece of cloth worth 5 rupees. After a few moments, the cloth lies on the ground. He forgets all about it. Or he may carry it under his arm. If you say to the child, "That's a beautiful piece of cloth. Whose is it?" He answers, "Why, it is mine. My daddy gave it to me." You may say, "My darling, won't you give it to me?" And he will reply, "Oh no, it is mine. My daddy gave it to me. I won't give it to you." Some minutes later, you may coax him with a toy or a music box worth a penny, and he will give you the cloth. Again, a child 5 years old is not attached even to sattva. You may find him today very fond of his playmates in the neighborhood. He doesn't feel happy for a moment without seeing them. But tomorrow, when he goes to another place with his parents, he finds new playmates. All his love is now directed to his new friends, and he almost forgets about his old ones. Further, a child has no pride of caste or family. If the mother says to him about a certain person, "This man is your elder brother," he believes it. He believes this to be 100% true. One of the two men may have been born in the Brahmin family, and the other may belong to a low caste, say that of the blacksmiths, but they will take their meal from the same plate. A child is beyond all ideas of purity and impurity. He is not bound by social conventions. He doesn't hesitate to come out naked before others. Then there is an ego of old age. Dr. Sakar laughs. An old man has many shackles: caste, pride, shame, hatred, and fear. Furthermore, he is bound by the ideas of worldly cleverness, calculating intelligence, and deceit. He is angry with anybody if he is angry with anybody. He cannot shake it off easily. Perhaps he keeps the feeling as long as he lives. Again, there is the ego of scholarship and the ego of wealth. The ego of old age is an unripe ego. To the doctor, there are a few men who cannot attain knowledge of God. Men proud of their scholarship, proud of their education, or proud of their wealth. If you speak to such people about a holy man and ask them to visit him, They will make all kinds of excuses and will not go. But in their heart of hearts, they think, why, we are big people ourselves, must we go and visit someone else? A characteristic of Thomas is pride. Pride and delusion come from Thomas. It is said in the Purana that Ravana had an excess of rajas, Kumbhakarna of tamas, and Bibhishana of sattva. That is why Bibhishana was able to receive the grace of Rama. Another characteristic of Thomas is anger. Through anger, one loses one's wits and cannot distinguish between right and wrong. In a fit of anger, Hanuman set fire to Lanka without thinking for a moment that the fire might also burn down the hut where Sita lived. Still another feature of Thomas is lust. Girinder Ghosh of Paturagata once remarked, since you cannot get rid of your passion, your lust, your anger, and so on, give them a new direction. Instead of desiring worldly pleasures, desire God. Have intercourse with Brahman. If you cannot get rid of anger, then change its direction. Assume the tamasic attitude of bhakti and say, what? I have repeated the hallowed name of Durga, and shall I not be liberated? How can I be a sinner anymore? How can I be bound anymore? If you cannot get rid of temptation, direct it to God. Be infatuated with God's beauty. If you cannot get rid of pride, then be proud to say that you are the servant of God. You are the child of God. Thus, turn the 6 passions towards God. Doctor, it is very hard to control the sense organs. They are like restive horses whose eyes must be covered with blinkers. In the case of some horses, it is necessary to prevent them from seeing at all. Master, a man need not fear anything if but once he receives the grace of God. If but once he obtains the vision of God. If but once he attains self-knowledge, then the 6 passions cannot do him any harm. Eternally perfect souls like Narada and Prahlada did not have to take the trouble to put blinkers on their eyes. The child who holds his father's hand while walking along the narrow bulk in the paddy field may loosen his hold in a moment of carelessness and slip into the dish. But it is quite different if the father holds the child's hand. Then the child never falls into the ditch. Doctor, but it is not proper for a father to hold his child by the hand. Master, it is not quite like that. Great sages have childlike natures. Before God, they are always like children. They have no pride. Their strength is the strength of God, the strength of their Father. They have nothing to call their own. They are firmly convinced of that. Doctor, can you make a horse go forward without first covering his eyes with blinkers? Can one realize God without controlling the passions? Master, what you say is according to the path of discrimination. It is known as Jnana Yoga. Through that path, too, one attains God. The Jnanis say that an aspirant must, first of all, purify his heart. First, he needs spiritual exercises. Then he will attain knowledge. But God can also be realized through the path of devotion. Once the devotee develops love for the lotus feet of God and enjoys the singing of his name and attributes, he does not have to make a special effort to restrain his senses. For such a devotee, the sense organs come under control of themselves. Suppose a man has just lost his son and is mourning his death. Can he be in a mood to quarrel with others that very day, or enjoy a feast in the house of a friend? Can he, that very day, show his pride before others or enjoy new pleasures? If the moth discovers light, can it remain in darkness any longer? I think we're going to stop right in the middle of this because it's about time. And if everyone will remember what page we're on, I'll put a marker in the book. Are there any questions or any comments on any of this, any of Ramakrishna's stories today? Any comment? Question? Okay. Sunday, we will have Rajaprana speaking here on seeing the world as it is. Next Wednesday, we'll have our class on the Eternal Companion, and a week from today, we'll have this Gospel of Ramakrishna again. Both are in the temple at 5 o'clock, the Eternal Companion and Sri Ramakrishna. And I will make the announcement again. The temple is open from 6:30 in the morning till 7 in the evening, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it's open from 5 to 7 in the evening. And you're all welcome to come. We'll end with a chant. Om Shanti, 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 Hari Om Tat Sat, Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.